Welcome to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages, with your host, Matthew Shipp. This is the podcast for all of those who are involved in the agriculture all the way to the distribution of beverages. And now your host, Matthew Shipp.
Hello, this is Matthew Shipp. I'm here with Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages, and I'm here today with Gabe Miller, the winemaker out here at Noboleis Vineyards. I get that right?
Got it.
All right.
Nailed it.
So I am sitting in their offices overlooking a very beautiful vineyard. Gabe, tell me a little more about yourself, how you got started here, your story, and then we'll kind of go into a little bit of Noboleis' story as well.
So I started here at Noboleis in 2013, actually as an intern. I was finishing up kind of my schooling. I went back to school to learn how to make wine and to learn more about growing grapes. One of my last stops was here as an intern, and I kept coming until they started paying me. And I worked for free for a while, and then eventually wormed my way onto the payroll and been here ever since, and kind of took over most of the winemaking. You know, within a few short years, I was doing the majority of the cellar work, and in the last few years have taken over pretty much 100% of the winemaking planning and everything. And now we've got 3 full-time winemakers on staff, and we've definitely grown a lot in those 10 years. We went from, prior to me coming here, I think our biggest year was about 7,000 gallons of total wine production. And now we're looking at somewhere around 35,000 gallons.
Impressive. So how many years have you been here? Is it 10?
A little over 10. Yeah, this will be my 11th harvest.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit more about Noboleis, the vineyards in general, like how it came to be and where you are now?
Sure. The vision for this was really Bob Nolan. So Bob was the original founder of the winery, along with his wife Luann. Bob purchased the property back in the early 2000s and originally told his family he just wanted to grow grapes and then sell them. Mm-hmm. And then shortly after they had everything planted, he kind of made a decision that he actually really did want to make the wine. And so the grapes were first planted in 2005, and around 2009, they actually broke ground on building the original winery building, which is actually the building across from where we're at now. Put that in the ground in 2009, and then we opened to the public in 2010. And from there, the company is now kind of run by Bob and Luann's 2 daughters, Chris and Angie, and they kind of oversee the whole day-to-day operations. And we're at this point we're a 100% women-owned business as well. So Chris, Angie, and Luann, who's still involved with the winery, run the day-to-days.
That's amazing. Noboleis is an interesting name. Where does that come from?
So Noboleis is a smashed up word. So it comes from Nolan, Bob's last name, Newbold, which is Chris's last name, and Geis, which is Angie's last name. So they took Nolan, Newbold, and Geis and smashed them together and came up with Noboleis.
Ah, okay. I have to admit, the first time I saw this, I was like, do they just make ice wines? I did not know, but that's really neat. And it sounds, well, very noble. Great. So you've been here almost 11 years, right?
Well, this will be my 11th harvest. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So about 10 years, 11 harvests.
Okay. So what are some of the general challenges you've noticed you have here, and how have you overcome some of them? Is just even now beyond producing, beyond the winemaking, but even just the growth of Noboleis.
So I think we face a few challenges. One thing for us, one of the biggest challenges for us has been growth. We've been astronomically lucky with the amount of growth that we've seen over the last 10 years. I mean, I think that's a challenge for any company. We've always wanted to be kind of smart with how we grew the business, but you know, there comes logistics where equipment needs to be upgraded. We run out of just physical space to store things, to put in new tanks, things like that. And so growth has been a challenge, a fun one, but a challenge. I think some of the other challenges you face, especially in the wine business in Missouri, there is a little bit of perceived bias against Missouri wine from Missourians, which always blows my mind. So you kind of have to, convince people that, hey, what we're doing out here is special. It is good. And people are starting to see that what we make is unique and hopefully delicious.
So going on that, what do you feel is the most special and most unique thing about Missouri wines, especially Noboleis wines?
Well, there's a lot. I think, being in Missouri, we have a lot of opportunities to be innovative and do unique and different things that maybe you don't have in certain other areas of the world where there's an expectation for what those wines are supposed to be. That gives us an opportunity to do a lot of experimentation and to find new and unique ways to express our grapes. I think the grapes that we do grow here are, for the most part, they are very tasty, and we can do a lot with them. I think our dry wines are very good. I think there's a perception that we only make sweet wines, and we don't really even make that many sweet wines. So most of what we do is drier wines. I think we've had a lot of success with that.
Okay. So how important do you feel team communication between, producers, owners, even the people who are your hospitality crew? How important is that communication between you guys, and how's that affected your growth?
Oh, I think that is hugely important. So we have a vision that comes down from the owners, and they're very quality conscious. So that kind of motivates everything that we do, from the winemaking standpoint, from a grape growing standpoint, to what we do in the tasting room, to what we do in the wholesale market and events. The ownership, I had a vision for what we could do that was higher quality, innovative wines. And that message translated all the way down, and they've really put the money that they've invested in the company into that plan. Is to, we could have invested a lot of money in like a flashier tasting room, that sort of thing, but they really put a lot of their investment into quality grape equipment. And then it's been our job to kind of communicate that to our customers and through the entire company. And it takes a big coordinated effort between them, the winemaking team, our agricultural team, the viticulturists that actually grow, and that's Fred. Fred's our head of viticulture here. The communication between he and I on how to get the best quality grapes and fruit that we can into the winery itself. And then there's got to be a lot of communication between us as winemakers and the people that are actually the frontline people presenting the wine to the customers as to why our wines are different, what we've done to try and improve quality and do all of those sorts of things.
So what have you done to really improve that communication? How do you make the communication effective? There we go. I had to search for this.
A lot of meetings, because sometimes it's you're trying to explain somebody that might be a part-time person. And we have a really awesome part-time staff here that come out and work on the weekends and present the wines to people. But they may not have an extensive winemaking background. They may not have an extensive wine background at all. And so you're trying to explain to those people what we did with the grapes to get them into that bottle in the best possible way that we can. And so there's a lot of communication between the winemaking staff and the people that are really on the front line presenting the wine to the customers. And so we try to focus in on training, doing tastings with our tasting room staff, which, usually pretty fun nights. You get everybody here and, hey, let's try a bunch of wines and go, and not necessarily just wines from the bottle. We will take them down into the winery and say, hey, try this out of the tank, and give them an understanding of where the wine starts, and then they can see where it finishes.
Wow, it's one of the few meetings where you definitely leave much happier than you came in. That's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
That'd be a great meeting. I like that. Keep that in mind for future meetings. I might host and coach. Before all of this information gets to your frontline staff, and it all has to be made. You have planning, everything from your viticulture all the way to the harvesting, the producing, and to the client, make sure they like it. Can you take us through? I know we can't be here all day if you took us through every step, but can you kind of generally take us through like how all this comes to be, starting from from the vine?
So I think yes. So the neat thing about this industry, winemaking in particular, and I think it's a little different from beer or like a distillery, is that we work in a yearly cycle. So it's kind of like the weather. If you sick of it, wait 5 minutes and it'll change. That's kind of the winemaking environment too. So for instance, right now it's mid-July and we are in harvest preparation and planting stage. So we are working. The grapes are kind of out there doing their thing. We've had berries set. They're getting ready to enter the next phase of ripening, which we call veraison. They'll plump up. They'll start to get a little bit bigger. Like right now, they're just little BBs of acid. And in a couple of weeks, they'll start to plump up. They'll start to get more juice in them. They'll start to accumulate sugars. The red grapes will go through a color change. So right now they're green. They'll be purple by the end of August and going into September. So at this stage, it's all about planning, getting ready, making sure we have everything that we need to pull those grapes off the vines and get them into tanks and ferment them. What also goes with that is we're trying to do harvest estimates, trying to figure out how much fruit we're actually going to have, how we're going to allocate all of that fruit, what wines are we going to make in what styles, what experiments we want to do, because we do experiments every year. I've never had a year where we were like, everything we did last year was perfect. Let's not mess with it.
Never had one of those, huh?
Never had one of those. It'd be great. So every year we're doing experiments, trying new things. And so right now we're in that phase. Then when we get around to the end of August, beginning of September, that's when the fruit will actually start coming off the vines. For me in the winemaking phase, that's my busiest time of year. We may have mornings where we start at 4 a.m. and we don't leave until midnight.
Wow.
And so we're crushing fruit, we're getting it in tanks, and then along with that, we're also monitoring the juice and the wine that we've already harvested and crushed. So that's your busiest time of year. That's kind of your all hands on deck.
How many weeks is that or months is that?
It'll go from the end of August through most of October.
Wow. So all hands on deck for that. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of abandoned my family until Halloween, and then I go home and we have a big Halloween. So so we kind of dad's back home in Halloween. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's kind of that phase is all harvest and fermentation. And then once we get out of that, from a winemaking standpoint, we kind of roll into stabilization. So that's where we're taking our wines. They're fermented. They're wine at this point. We're transferring red wines to barrels, getting them laid down so that they can age. We're taking our white wines and we're cold stabilizing and protein stabilizing them. And that'll last through the first portion of winter through January.
What's protein stabilizing?
So wines can have protein in them that's so that's also called heat stabilization.
Mm-hmm.
So if you bought a wine that was not protein or heat stable and you threw it in the trunk of your car today, it's mid-July, and that trunk of your car got up to 110 degrees, which it could easily do, it could bind the proteins in the wine and it could make the wine hazy. Now, I don't recommend you cooking your wine ever like that. That's not good for it in general. But really, when that protein forms, it's there's nothing wrong with it. It's really just a cosmetic defect, but we want to prevent that from happening. Really, cold stabilization is the same thing. So we'll get the wine super cold, and it'll form tartrate crystals. We want to get those tartrate crystals out of the wine before we put it into a bottle and you take it home and put it in your fridge. There's nothing dangerous about the tartrate crystals. They're odorless and tasteless, but they just form these little crystals in the bottom of the bottle, and people don't like that.
Fair enough. Okay. Now you're at the barreling of your wine at this point?
Yeah, at this point, yeah, we'll start barreling, and then with the white wines, once we get them stable, we're looking at finishing already.
Okay.
So white wines, rosés, we're looking at coming up with our final blends, figuring out what those are going to be, and filtering and bottling. So in an ideal world, I will have white wines and rosés filtered, finished, bottled, by the end of March or beginning of April. And so that portion of the cycle is done. and then we can start looking into figuring out what we're doing with red wines and other projects. And then we go right back into planning, and we start the cycle all over again. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Now, how do you, after you tried out some maybe new wines or from your lab, how do you kind of gauge the interest of your clients or buyers or distributors that they're going to really like this and you're going to need to make more of it?
So if it's a new wine, if it's an experiment, a crazy harebrained idea that myself or one of the other winemakers have, we always start on a smaller scale, usually. So, if I'm making 2,000 gallons of a particular wine, I might take 300 of it and do this small experiment. And if it passes the test of all of us like it, then if it doesn't, if the experiment fails, and usually they don't. Usually we kind of plan them out so we know it's not going to be an absolute catastrophe that we're going to have to dump down the drain, because it's very difficult to, unlike a brewery, if a brewery makes a beer and it's an absolute catastrophe, it's a failure, they can brew a new one. And, they work on a couple of week cycle for kicking out new beers, and they can brew constantly throughout the entire year. The difference with a winery is if we get one shot per year, fruit comes in the fall. If we screw it up, it's gone. We got to wait another year. So usually experiments are small scale for us. We have to do smaller scale stuff, and then we either have to make it work or we've got to try to blend it off into other stuff where you don't even notice. Luckily, we haven't had a whole lot of catastrophes where it's been an issue like that. So you usually will start small with experiments.
Okay.
So we kind of have a good idea the next year, is it something that we're going to blow up and go, on a bigger scale with it. So we'll start small, and then when we have this idea, we'll do a lot of lab mock-ups, and we'll kind of present it to, obviously our owners here and the other managers that kind of run the tasting room, get their thoughts on it. Our wholesale manager, the person that actually goes out and sells it to stores and stuff, his name's John. We'll kind of let them all taste it, get their opinion first. And usually if you're here on a day when we're doing, mock-ups and stuff in the lab, we'll let customers and the other tasting room employees try it.
That's awesome. Hey, there's a good hint for everybody coming out here.
Yeah, Monday through Friday. That's if there's lab stuff going on, it's Monday through Friday, and you can maybe get a sneak. You'll see us come upstairs with some flasks and beakers and get to try some weird stuff.
That sounds really cool. All right. That's cool. So now when you're coming up with flasks and beakers, are you and sharing it? Are you at the second year of trying things out, or is this the first year?
It depends. A lot of times it's first year.
First year, okay.
So like last year, for instance, we did an experiment where we made what's called an orange wine or an amber wine, where we took white fruit and fermented it like a red fruit. So with the skin contact and everything. We only made about 2 barrels worth, which is about 120 gallons. It's a real small batch. And that was kind of one of our big experiments last year. And that'll go, we will actually have some of that for sale here in the next couple of weeks. The experiment was a success. We did not have to try and blend it off.
Congratulations.
Yeah. It's nice when they work out. So that one, we've been having people try it. Actually, we had people try it yesterday that were in and get their opinion on it.
All right. Cool. Thanks a lot. So in this whole harvest pour journey, what are some of your current or just persistent challenges you kind of run into?
For us, we're agriculture based in Missouri, and so the weather is always a challenge. The last few years have been very interesting weather-wise, and I don't foresee that that's ever going to change for us. We went from an absolute drought a couple of weeks ago to now we're getting 2 inches of rain a night for the last week and a half. So that can always present interesting challenges. The vineyards are very sensitive to, you can go from having a great crop to a terrible crop literally overnight, depending on what the weather does, and at different points of the year. So that's certainly a challenge, especially as you're trying to grow. Unpredictability of what I think we have one of the best vineyard managers out there. And I feel for him because his job is so hard. And there's such an unpredictability about what the fruit's going to do, what the vines are going to do. And I think that there's a little bit more stabilization in other industries than that. I'm harping on brewers. Sorry to all my friends that are brewers. You can go out and buy grain or hops pretty much any time of the year and not have to worry about it. It goes back to that. We get one shot. Mm-hmm. And so if the fruit doesn't come in perfectly or it comes in low, if we have a bad harvest in terms of quantity, that can have a real effect on what we do that year. And then we have to kind of look at other things. Luckily, we do have just a phenomenal vineyard manager that does a pretty good job getting us good fruit.
Since you do have that one shot, I figure you're doing a lot of refining your workflows on the fly. How does that work with your team?
Well, we have a really flexible team. The three of us and actually last year, the four of us, because we had a guy that we pulled out of the tasting room to help us do a whole bunch of work, and he was awesome. You have to be flexible and just have an understanding that this could be a very long day or a very short day, depending on how things go. Maybe we have days where we're expecting to get 5 or 6 tons of fruit and we get 14. Yeah. Or we get days where we're expecting to get 14 tons of fruit and we get 4. And it just goes with harvest. I mean, all of us put in, I don't know what a 40-hour work week in September looks like. I mean, feels like that's about 3 days. So you just have to kind of understand that that's how it's going to be. And the guys that we have are pretty awesome about understanding that and just putting in the work. There's a reward at the end, when you see that product in the bottle. The first one that comes off that bottling line is pretty exciting.
Oh, that's awesome. So do you see any with Missouri wines or even wines in general, any kind of trends happening? Like, so you've been experimenting with like the orange wine, and you've even moved along to some hard ciders as well.
Yeah, that's been kind of a fun project. Always wanted to experiment with ciders, and then when we hired one of our other winemakers, his name's Tom Mannion. He actually had done a lot of work with ciders. He worked for a cidery before he came here, and kind of a natural expansion for us. And it works logistically because we make wine one time a year. So a lot of time, once our wine's bottled, tanks are kind of sitting empty. Mm-hmm. So it's almost a natural extension of what we're already doing. We have the equipment and it's sitting here kind of idle. It kind of made sense for us to expand into ciders. It's something we enjoy, so we have a passion for it. And then to try and do something kind of unique and different with our equipment is always kind of a nice bonus. And we kind of found some ways to do it a little bit differently. There's so many great ciders that are being made. A lot of great cideries in St. Louis. We kind of wanted to give it our own kind of unique spin and do something very different than what we're doing with the wines. And so we're making these dry, bottle conditioned, farmhouse style ciders, which is really different than what we do with wine for the most part.
Really excited to try that out sometime soon. I like the idea behind, like, you just have the idle equipment and now you're using it, and it's kind of really a very proactive innovation practice you guys have here. Yeah.
I mean, we want to try and, if we made the same wines over and over every year, that would be totally fine and okay. But what makes winemaking kind of exciting is the opportunity to get to do experimental stuff and to do stuff maybe differently every year and to try new things and to do the experimenting. I think that's where you get to actually flex the creativity. But yeah, if I made the same 8 wines every year and I just made those wines every year.
Yeah. No, I agree. So final couple questions. If somebody wanted to get started in either winemaking or just the wine industry in general, what advice would you have for them?
Boy, that one's a tough one. So if you were to ask my vineyard manager if you should go plant grapes, his answer is probably going to be no, unless you really have a passion for it. Because it's a lot of hard work and a lot of sleepless nights wondering whether or not you made a good decision. And but if you do have that passion for it, I think the industry in Missouri is going to continue to grow. I think that there's we're really kind of still in our infancy from the recovery after Prohibition, which I know was 100 years ago, but still, or close to 100 years ago. You had the industry disappear, and then you had some pioneers kind of pop up 40 years ago or so, 50 years ago, and they were kind of the big players. And for years, that was all you had. And now you're starting to see more and more wineries kind of pop up with, a lot of the ones that kind of popped up in the last 30 years were kind of mom and pop operations. More, I'm going to retire and plant a vineyard. Mm-hmm. Well, now it's getting to be where it's more big business. People are actually coming in with innovative ideas, growing the industry. The state is very involved. The University in Columbia, super involved in the industry now. We have a great state winemaker. And so you're starting to see more quality emphasis put into the industry. And it's really exciting to see where it's going to go. And hopefully the sky's the limit there. If you're interested in winemaking, I think you're going to start to see more opportunities pop up to actually get into the industry at the ground level. Certainly, there's we're always accepting interns. So there's tons of internship.
Trying to shorten those 4 a.m. to 12 a.m. days a little bit.
Somebody's got to go clean that tank. So So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, and there will be more opportunity surrounding it.
Oh, that's great. That's good to hear. I'm sure a lot of people will be excited to hear that, especially if they're interested in the winemaking business. So this is probably the toughest question, I think, for any brewer, roaster, or winemaker. Do you have a favorite here at Noboleis?
Can I cheat and say 3?
Go for it.
Well, so I think my favorite is always whatever we're trying new. Whatever the experiment is usually my favorite. So because that's, I guess there's the unknown. You want to see what it's going to be. And so that's always the one that you're most excited about, is you don't know what it's going to be yet. I also really love our fortified dessert wines, ports. I think I love those. They just are amazing and fun. And then, our Norden. I really love our Norden.
All right, great. So I see everybody walking around here at Noboleis with these new fancy red and blue shirts supporting our new St. Louis Major League Soccer, I believe, the St. Louis City.
Yeah, that's kind of exciting. That's really exciting for us because when we kind of, our wholesale manager, John, sent just an email it's been a couple of years now, to the soccer team just to kind of say hi and see if we could maybe have our wine in the stadium because we thought that would be cool. The soccer team was really open to wanting to have local businesses be a part of what they were growing. And it would have been very easy for them to look for a wine partner from one of the big national brands who could probably afford a whole lot more money to throw into that sponsorship. And instead, they wanted to partner with smaller local entities. And we got really lucky in that they reached back out to us immediately. We had a bunch of meetings with them to try and figure out, what our small little winery could do to become a partner, and it's been really exciting and fun to be a part of, to be honest. It's just been really fun to see all of the excitement that the soccer team's generated in the city in general. What they've done with the stadium is just phenomenal. And then for us to be a tiny little part of that is really cool. It was a really cool opportunity for us, and it's been really exciting.
Isn't the team also a completely women-owned team as well?
Yes. Yeah, they are. So
awesome.
Which is kind of neat. For kind of a little carry through to us being completely women-owned as well. So.
Yeah. Okay. And do you guys have any upcoming events or promotions you'd like to tell us about up here in late August, September, October?
So September and October is always a fun time to come out to the wineries. It's kind of our busiest time of the year from a customer standpoint. It's kind of interesting because it coincides with our busiest time of the year making wine as well. So you can kind of come out. If you get here early enough, you can still see the grapes on the vines before we pick them. And So that's always exciting. We have speakers and movies and different classes that we hold on a lot of Friday nights. And if you check the events calendar on our website, they'll kind of list what we have and which weekends. Outside events, we've got the Best of Missouri Market at the Missouri Botanical Gardens, which is always a fun event. We'll be there pouring wine. We do some of the Tower Grove farmers markets. We'll be at some of those pouring wine. If you just check our website on the calendar, there's a list of all of the different events and things that we have going on.
All right. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I would imagine that October out here would be spectacular. So if you've never been to Noboleis, just I'll attempt to paint the picture of wooded rolling hills and an open field with rows and rows of grapes. And you can imagine the colors you'd get out here in Missouri about October. So it'd be a pretty spectacular sight to see.
Yeah, if you want to beat the crowd, Monday through Friday is always great. If you have a day off Monday through Friday, I know there's not live music and all of that stuff going on, but if you want a more intimate wine tasting experience, Monday through Friday is great to come out. You can kind of spend more one-on-one time with the person behind the tasting room bar. They can explain the wines a little bit more in depth than when the tasting bar is 10 people deep and they're just handing you wine.
That sounds awesome. Well, Gabe, thanks a lot for your time. This has been a great interview, and I hope everybody's learned a lot. I know I learned a lot about the processes and how your team works and adapts, and the fact that you get one shot at some of these things, and you really have to make it count. Again, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it, and hope everybody else enjoyed this interview as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages with Matthew Shipp. Check the show notes for our guest contact information and connect with Matthew Shipp on LinkedIn today.